Does Taiwan need nuclear weapons? Will China's manufacturing overcapacity doom the rest of East Asia to economic stagnation? And what is going on with Silicon Valley's pro-Trump constituency? Our guest today is the legendary economist Noah Smith. Noah was a professor at Stony Brook University and a columnist for Bloomberg. He now publishes his prolific writing on the Noahpinion substack, and he is the author of an upcoming book on the revival of the Japanese economy. Noah, welcome to ChinaTalk.
Howdy, it's great to be here.
Let's talk first about presidential powers in the second Trump administration. So you wrote that piece about the restraints on Elon Musk, and I'm interested in the similar question, which is, what do you think are the constraints on Trump within this new coalition that he's put together?
So the thing is that Trump lost a lot of his old allies. Rudy Giuliani and all these people were discredited by their involvement with January 6th or, various legal efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And Trump is very old. And he was sort of running on fumes and had lost a lot of his allies. And then in swoops Elon Musk and the sort of the tech right, as we call them, and kind of bailed him out. He might have won the election anyway, just because people were so dissatisfied with Biden. I'm not a politics expert, I don't know. But certainly the tech right seems to be the most influential faction within Trump's team right now. But most influential faction doesn't mean omnipotent. So it's not clear going forward what the balance of power within the Trump coalition is going to be.
What are they going to spend this influence on, do you think?
Right. I mean, I think the number one thing they'll spend influence on is things that will make the business climate better in America. They are business people. Now, you can call that corruption if you want, but it has a long history in America, China, and elsewhere. And in Japan, Kei Donren's influence within the LDP is not dissimilar. And so I think that business people have political influence and use it to support better business climate. Honestly, if you want my personal editorializing, I think that we do need some of those things and not others of those things. I think that there's lots of deregulation that needs to happen. It's become pretty clear at this point that deregulation is kind of the next frontier of economic policy, and it's something we were unable to do for many, many years. Even Reagan was unable to do it. And so Carter was the last real deregulator. I guess Clinton deregulated finance and it blew up, and then appetite for deregulation just died. Now we absolutely need deregulation in America. The tech right is going to push for that. Democrats will unfortunately resist it, but they will lose, I think. And that's good. I'm a Democrat, but I think they need to lose on this because I think that progressive love for regulation's sake is just killing and strangling America. Unfortunately, this is going to come with a small side of some kinds of deregulation that shouldn't be done, like financial deregulation. I think is often bad, but it allows rich people to cash out very quickly on their asset appreciation.
Sure. And
so I think that, So I'm highly optimistic that the tech right is going to get good deregulation done, but I think it's going to come with a side of some bad financial deregulation.
I see. Do you think they'll oppose tariffs?
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to that.
No insights from the parties in San Francisco?
Everyone at the parties is saying nice things about tariffs, and that means nothing. They're saying nice things about that because they feel like they were part of this coalition that won. Mm-hmm. They were part of this winning coalition, and Trump says tariffs, and so tariffs, because that means we have an army on our side. But when it comes down to the actual nitty gritty of, do you want tariffs that will actually impact the component sourcing for your businesses, things might get different very quick. So you might see some push to make the tariffs symbolic behind the scenes, and what people say in public might not equal. And so I'm completely speculating. I don't know, but I think that anything that hurts tech businesses is something I wouldn't bet on happening. Now, one interesting thing about tech people is that, Elon is a hardware guy, but a lot of tech people are software guys. Sure. And software doesn't source a lot of components from overseas. Right. Tariffs aren't going to hurt them very much. The software people aren't necessarily going to oppose tariffs very hard because they don't get hit by tariffs.
Sure. They do get hit by, restrictions on immigration, though.
Exactly, which is why you saw this titanic fight over high-skilled immigration, especially H-1Bs, especially Indian immigration. You saw this fight on the right around Christmas time.
Yeah, that was a great post. You also wrote that export controls are going to be kind of the litmus test for whether or not Trump has what it takes to stand up to China. And if he starts canceling them, then that's a really bad sign. So if that starts happening, what do you think about, the China hawks within Trump's coalition? What kind of measures do you foresee them implementing to do sort of damage control?
There are discussions and fights behind closed doors that I am not privy to, and I also don't know what people's real objective functions are here. It could be that Elon Musk just, loves China and thinks that authoritarianism is great and he will rule the world as one of the three great authoritarian leaders of the world in a new Metternich system that will crush global wokeness. which is something someone suggested to me the other day. But that said, I have no idea if that's real at all. I don't know. It could be that Elon Musk is just using China and waiting to sort of like backstab China and like knows that we need to oppose them. He notably hasn't turned any SpaceX stuff over to China. Sure. And SpaceX stuff is specifically stuff that could oppose China in very concrete ways. And he's shown no, Tesla electric car stuff. It was clear China was going to just win on electric cars on its own. So it could be a pragmatic move. And it could be that he says like, Taiwan is part of China or whatever, because that's what you have to say to do business in China. The NBA has to say that. Every business person has to say that. It could be that he really resents having to say that, because I know I would if I were him. And it could be that he is, preparing a counterstrike that will restore American power vis-a-vis China. So I don't know what his objective function is, and I don't claim to know. As for what other people want, I think that you see the pro-China faction is all finance. So the finance guys are pro-China. They have been sort of downgraded in the Trump administration. Tech's very anti-China in general because China shut out tech. And so China is like, no, Google, you can't come in. No, Facebook, you can't come in. They shut out all this tech. And the tech fears China, correctly fears China. Finance just wants to like make a quick buck off of investing in China. Although the degree to which they think they can do that is falling rapidly. I talked to private equity guys, and the private equity guys, 2 years ago, they were saying like, what's with this de-risking? What's with this decoupling? What are you talking about? This is crap. And they were pouring money into China. Now you see all these news stories about, private equity being kicked out of China, trying desperately to get their money out of China. And I talked to some of these same private equity guys on email, and they're like, yeah, you're right. Like de-risking is a thing. Like, I was like, a modicum of foresight is useful in the investment world. And, so the finance guys are becoming less pro-China.
Sure.
The reason Trump might sell it to China is personal.
Right.
China, by all accounts, changed the TikTok algorithm to promote pro-Trump content.
Right. If
TikTok is a pro-Trump media thing in America, Trump will not want to ban it.
Right.
And Jeff Yass, this billionaire, owns a lot of TikTok from the American side. He contributed a ton to Trump.
Right. And
Trump can be bought. Trump is a deeply corrupt individual and always has been. And that's just a fact. And how China can use its levers to control Trump as a man, as a person, in ways that it couldn't control the U.S. right or the conservative movement, in ways that it couldn't control Elon Musk as a man, probably.
Sure.
And so I doubt that Elon Musk can be controlled by China so easily. I don't buy the idea that, Elon Musk will just do anything to salvage like Tesla Shanghai.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that, he's his own man in that sense. And he wants to salvage it. Who knows? I'm speculating about Musk. But I think Trump is much more viable. Trump is much more controllable. And so if Trump is going to sell it to China, watch those export controls.
Right. And I know that we're all spitballing here, so please spitball away. But what do you think about, the conservatives like Marco Rubio? Like if things start to go badly and Trump starts to appease China or try and make some grand bargain, what do you foresee him doing?
I think that it will be very hard. And you saw this with the TikTok ban. You saw Mike Johnson have to pull tons of gymnastics in order to pass the TikTok ban. You saw restrictions on investment in China that would have hurt Elon Musk get removed from the continuing resolution. Yeah. Like that's what they really wanted to remove. And as soon as those were removed, they didn't care about all the spending that was being done. The idea of that we want austerity, we don't want all the spending, we don't want this like giant stacked bill, whatever, blah, blah, blah. All BS, they wanted to remove the China investment restrictions.
Yeah.
How generalizable that will be is an open question. And they might still put the China investment restrictions in a later version of the bill. That fight's not over.
Right.
So all this stuff is up in the air. It annoys me to have a country where these clandestine sort of backroom deals between rich business people, conservative power brokers, and, a corrupt president determines what American policy will be. That scares me and annoys me that we have a country like that. It's where, what gets said in the press doesn't matter as much, right? What gets said, like public opinion, the press, the opposition, none of these things matter.
Right.
What the New York Times doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
And so there were all these checks and balances, before, but because of Trump's victory and because of the shift in media to social media, TikTok and the ghost of Twitter, but especially TikTok, now rule our media in ways that like CBS The New York Times do not. And that's a scary world to live in. The idea that some shadowy forces are making these decisions in a back room somewhere and you are not privy to them at all. You don't matter. And so we lived in that 120 years ago. We lived during the days of the Spanish Civil War and, or Spanish-American War, I'm sorry. The Spanish-American War and, William McKinley being, influenced by all the, by Mark Hanna and William Randolph Hearst controlling politicians by threatening them with media and the days of caucuses and smoky back rooms and stuff like that. Pre-FDR, pre-World War II, that's the political world in which we did live. And we may be heading back to something like that. But I understand how people could sit there and feel powerless at the national level to affect politics because elites are controlling everything and you, the regular person, can't even get good information. Like you're getting lies on TikTok, you're getting just absolute bullshit screeching on X, that doesn't help you. And yeah, sure, the New York Times would bullshit you sometimes, and CBS would bullshit you sometimes, but the degree of bullshitting was less, and it was also consistent in that their biases were at least consistent and knowable, where they were just whatever partisan screechers happen to take over X today, or whatever stupid TikToks happen to go viral with misinformation. Now you live in a media ecosystem that's much more similar to the era of the yellow press 120 years ago, back in the day, and secret bosses are controlling what we do. In a way, it feels like being in Turkey. Yeah. In Turkey, if you talk to any Turks about politics, they'll be like, there's dark forces, and Turkish people are some of the most embracing of conspiracy theories in the world. Why? Because they can't control anything.
Sure. Yeah. And, living in Taiwan, it's kind of, people ask me about this sometimes, and they feel pretty okay about Trump's election because they think, oh, well, Trump is crazier than Xi Jinping, so we're not going to get invaded. Or, Marco Rubio really likes Taiwan. And so I don't know. I'm not convinced either. It feels to be in a really precarious position to say oh, it's Taiwan's darkest hour. Help us, Marco Rubio. You're our only hope. Do you think this unpredictability is going to be an asset in foreign policy in any way? Or do you think that, Trump is now predictable to adversaries based on their experiences in the first administration?
Unpredictability, complete total asset. That is great. It is not the only thing going on. The corruption is a negative. Okay. Trump can be bribed. That's bad. But the unpredictability is great because China's leaders do not understand America at all.
Yeah.
Their models of America are even worse than the models in the minds of Taiwan or Japan or someone who knows us better. They're totally guessing. They're totally in the dark. You can see China take policy cues from progressive Twitter. I suspect that one reason that Xi kept zero COVID for so long was because all the COVID dead-ender progressives on Twitter praised him for it.
Really?
And then his MFA people, Ministry of Foreign Affairs people, yeah, and Global Times people, or whoever was reporting on what Americans think, was saying the progressive faction just hails you as this great leader because you've managed to control COVID, which is true of some. You had people crazies like Taylor Lorenz would say Xi Jinping's the greatest because they zero COVID.
Sure.
And, even after Omicron made it clear that zero COVID wasn't working, the dead enders would really praise China for being the last holdout. Yeah. And so I think this is not unprecedented. You saw the one-child policy was based in part on the population bomb by Paul Ehrlich, a stupid book that had stupid bad forecasts of population, just did not understand fertility dynamics at all. Or resource dynamics or just economics or anything, got China to, reduce the number of Chinese people by hundreds of millions. Paul Ehrlich prevented 100 million Chinese people from existing, maybe. But yet it showed China taking its cues from the American left. And that's insane, but also real because we live in an insane age now.
Sure. Okay, let's talk about proliferation. Speaking of insanity. So you've argued that Japan, South Korea, and maybe Poland need their own nuclear weapons.
That's right.
Do you think the case for that applies to Taiwan also?
No, because they can't. I mean, obviously, if Taiwan had gotten its nuclear weapons in the 60s, that would have been great. America stopped them from doing it and therefore doomed Taiwan. It's too late. Ukraine might be able to do it. I don't know. Ukraine should, if they can, get nukes. That would stop them from being conquered and make sure that they have territorial integrity. I don't think they can do it. But we live in a world in which, once again, great powers see fit to conquer smaller countries. Russia thinks it's their right to conquer Ukraine, of course. Then later they'll try to conquer Moldova and the Baltics, and maybe Poland, probably not Poland, Georgia, the Baltics, Moldova, all of these places, whatever is part of the old Soviet Union. they would willingly retake because I think they think of the Soviet Union as Russia. And so the worst off packed countries, they just try to like dominate externally and bully.
Yeah.
I don't think they'd actually try to incorporate Poland into the Russian Empire again. But they learn their lesson.
Yeah.
The Poles don't want them. But that's a big break in the world. America didn't try to make Iraq the 51st state.
Sure.
Trump LARPs about like, oh, we're going to take over Greenland, Panama, Canada. No, you're not.
Right.
Anyway, but Xi Jinping definitely wants to take over Taiwan and part of India, part of Japan, part of Okinawa certainly, various parts of other countries he has designs on. And if Russia did suffer some kind of collapse, I bet that China would actually, for safekeeping, as to protect it, take the part of the Russian Far East north of the Amur River, like that they used to have, that they still mark on some of their government maps as theirs.
Yes.
So they probably do that if Russia was in like a state of collapse. Right now, they'll be their like staunch ally. As soon as Russia, as soon as the tanks start rolling through Moscow or whatever like that, it's like, oh, this is ours for safekeeping. I think they do that. So I think Xi Jinping is an expansionist. Maybe not as much as Putin, but I think he is.
Mm-hmm.
And he certainly would like to. Maybe he would like to get North Korea to conquer South Korea, but I think he'd rather just dominate South Korea and have it be a satellite state of his.
Sure.
Keep Korea divided. Who knows what he wants? But that's my instinct. Certainly wants to dominate and humiliate and impoverish Japan. And so Japan needs nuclear weapons yesterday. South Korea needs nuclear weapons yesterday. These two countries need nuclear weapons right the fuck now.
Yeah.
And it's insanity that they're not getting them. They need them. That single policy change will stabilize East Asia more than anything else. Nothing the United States does is as powerful as those countries having nukes. Nothing. Even if the United States maintained a full security commitment to, protecting every inch of territorial integrity of blah, 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 and fought to defend Taiwan and all that, it would still not be as important as Japanese and South Korean nukes.
Are you worried at all about a preemptive reaction once, China finds out that these nuclear arsenals are being built, but before the bombs are actually completed, like a preemptive strike or some kind of, hack like we did on the Iranian centrifuges, for example?
They can try the hack. It'll fail. Because those countries already have all the technology and the materials to go nuclear very quickly. They'll try to sabotage the nuclear programs, but they'll probably fail. But those countries should exert lots of effort and care toward making sure that they don't get sabotaged.
Sure.
And have things not very networked so you can't hack them very easily. And so, Iran does that. We just, Israel's really good. I don't know, but China has a lot of people working on this kind of stuff. Sure. So they need to do this. If Taiwan goes nuclear, the invasion will start tomorrow. Or missile strikes, whatever, they will stop them. But if Japan and South Korea go nuclear, China will not attack them. My guess is that China would not be able to stop them from going nuclear, and that this would stabilize the situation in East Asia and make it so that North Korea will not attack and conquer South Korea. China will not, if they do, China will not attempt to support them. I don't think North Korea could beat South Korea on their own. I think that if South Korea has nukes, the balance of power on the Korean Peninsula is restored. If Japan has nukes, it means Japan's territorial integrity is assured, pretty much. Great powers do not attack nuclear armed states. They can sabotage them. They can erode their power. They can try to compromise them. They can use all sorts of gray zone warfare and whatever, to try to compromise them. But they do not invade them because they're too scared of nukes. The downside is too large. Sure. And when I'm talking about nukes, I think that Japan and South Korea should build up hundreds of nukes. I'm not talking about 5 nukes. I'm talking about hundreds of nukes.
Sure.
Maybe even thousands. Yeah. But depending on how many China builds. But certainly as many as China has, they should have. Yeah. And enough to blow up just level all the tier 1 cities in China easily. Vaporize the Forbidden City. Mm-hmm. All of that stuff. Vaporize the tomb of Shi Huangdi. I don't know. It's not worth it to China. Mm-hmm. You don't want to do that. You don't want to start a nuclear war, but have enough, and ultimately Japan and South Korea would lose that war because they'd get obliterated. But mutually assured destruction is a powerful deterrent. Sure. And so I would get nuclear weapons, and Poland should probably do it too at this point. Because America, when I wrote that post saying Poland might want to do it, it wasn't clear whether or not support for Ukraine would still be sufficient to allow the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians outright, in which case it would be maybe not. The Russian threat would recede. Now it's looking more like support for Ukraine is gonna vanish. From Germany too, because Germany is even worse than the United States in many ways. And so Poland now, yes, Poland needs nukes. Sure. In fact, that's why Poland's in NATO.
Yeah.
Poland said, we're going to get nukes unless you put us in NATO. So we put them in NATO. But now if the NATO guarantee is gone because Trump is there and won't answer an Article 5 summons, then and won't fight the Russians under any circumstances, you need nukes. The deal's off. Get the nukes. Like, we have seen countries with nukes, like no one is going to attack North Korea, right? No one's going to attack Pakistan, right? No one is going to attack Israel. Well, I mean, like Iran won't attack Israel in a serious way. They can get them nuked by Israel. And instead, Iran uses proxies to attack Israel, which are not doing well lately, but that's what it does. And Russia just uses gray zone warfare versus the European countries. And then India versus Pakistan has basically calmed down. And North Korea, like there's no talk of like bombing North Korea. And so
I think Trump talked about a nosebleed strike on North Korea during his first term, but that didn't happen. So not seriously.
Yeah, not seriously. Trump talks a lot of shit.
Sure.
So anyway, Japan and South Korea need nukes yesterday. They need them right now. There's no ambiguity. Do it. And then Poland needs it too.
Sure.
So then Taiwan should have gotten nukes in the 60s. Now it can't. It's done.
Well, there were nuclear weapons stationed on Taiwan during the Cold War, but they were secret. And the question is, like, why would you have a secret nuclear arsenal? Because
it wasn't secret from the Chinese. They knew it was there. It wasn't just public. It just wasn't publicized.
Exactly, because the fact needs to be known in order for it to be a deterrent, right?
That's right. It was just you had plausible deniability from the public by making it secret.
Right. So, I mean, they didn't invade then. The nukes left Taiwan in 1974.
Okay, so China did have nukes for quite a bit of that. Like, maybe there's secret nukes still in Taiwan, but I doubt it. I mean, and also we don't need them because we have submarines. Like, America doesn't need to put nukes in Taiwan. At that time, we would launch nukes with like intermediate range ballistic missiles. It was Cuban Missile Crisis kind of stuff.
Sure.
Now submarines can just do it all.
Yeah.
But if submarines become detectable, it might go back to short range missiles. I don't know.
Yeah.
And when I say Japan and South Korea need nukes, I do not mean American nukes.
Yeah.
Do not get American nukes. Get your own nukes.
Yeah.
Do not simply station American nukes on your soil like Germany does. Get your own launch codes. Get your own nuke. Have 100% control for your own nuclear weapons. This will ensure your independence. Sure. Not 100%, because you could still get such a madman in China that madman would launch nuclear war, like preemptively. That can happen. Maybe. I don't know. Hitler would do it. I don't know if we'll get a guy like Hitler ever again. But Xi Jinping, I don't think would. I do not think Xi Jinping would attack a nuclear armed state with a major conventional attack.
Let's say China attempts to invade Taiwan and fails spectacularly for some unknown reason. Do you think Taiwan should declare independence after declaring victory?
Yeah.
Yeah,
why not? I mean, like, you won't get another chance. Declaring independence after China fails. Yeah, I mean, like, I can't see much of a downside because it's like they already tried to invade you. At that point, you might as well, like, everybody likes a winner, and at that point, you're going to get the maximum support for your independence bid.
I read a paper about this that said the opposite thing, that said the United States should tell Taiwan not to kick China while they're down.
Oh, because China would nuke them or something. I also think there's if China's leaders were reasonable, in other words, if it wasn't Xi Jinping, there is room for a bargain to be struck, I think, where China says we're granting Taiwan conditional independence that's temporary. And Taiwan declares independence as Taiwan, not as the Republic of China, gives up any claim to China, all this stuff. Then Taiwan writes into their constitution that they will reunify with China, and that every X number of years, say 5 years, they will hold reunification talks with China. And so basically, China says it's temporary independence, and then Taiwan writes into their constitution, we're an independent country, but we're actually, part of China, and we will eventually reunify with them after talks. After talks. And then they just do talks. And then that bargain, I think Taiwan would support because it preserves the status quo. China would support because it would allow them to claim we reincorporated Taiwan, even as they grant them formal independence and, whatever. And then basically defuse the, America could possibly help sweeten this deal by agreeing to withdraw military forces from the area and, saying we relinquish all alliance with the new independent country of Taiwan and Taiwan becomes neutral. It's Finlandization. And so you say, like, Taiwan will not have allegiances with any, like, foreign power. And so you Finlandize it. And I think that there is a possible bargain to be struck there, but I don't think she would go for this. I think Jiang Zemin might have gone for this, but those days are done. But may come again. Like, Xi Jinping kind of a bumbling doofus. And like, the thing about Fox News dad is that he was really good at like being a realtor or whatever he did in his day job, but like he didn't really know how to run anything, a country.
Yeah.
And so I don't think Xi Jinping is that great at running China. I think he's good at riding herd on the CCP and being in control and being like, I am the king. He's good at like saying I'm the king and having everybody agree, yes, you're the king, sir. Tell me about your new 20-volume Xi Jinping thought book. But like, oh, so profound. But then like, he's good at that, but he's not good at actually running shit. Yeah. And so once he's gone, once you get someone who is good at running shit, there's a possibility they could make this deal with Taiwan. So I think the personal failings of Xi Jinping are much more of a factor in China's problems than people from China would admit openly. Or than people outside of China really realize yet. Like he has the trappings of an effective person because he has taken credit for all the great things China has done through the efforts of other people. Through, like the entrepreneurs who built Huawei and who built BYD and who built DJI and these companies, Tencent, I don't know, or the the leaders who came before him, the sort of elites that Deng Xiaoping and his chosen successors, Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, picked to run the party, the highly competent people. All those people built this incredible state, this incredibly powerful, effective Chinese state. And Xi Jinping has taken credit for that and is prepared to spend that inheritance down. He is going to go cash that out in an analogous way to how Putin is making war in Ukraine using a whole bunch of tanks and artillery that the Soviet Union built. I think Putin has made us appreciate the Soviet Union more than we did. Yes, the Soviet Union was dysfunctional. Yes, it was suboptimal. Yes, it collapsed in the end. But before that, it built the greatest land army that the human race had ever seen. And Putin is spending that army to just devastate Ukraine incompetently, taking like a few centimeters of Ukrainian territory for a whole bunch of casualties and getting all his tanks and artillery from the Soviet inheritance blown up.
Yeah.
Like in the same way, I think that Xi Jinping is in many ways spending the institutional inheritance that Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, and Hu Jintao, and the other people like, Wen Jiabao, Li Keqiang, and all those people, plus the private entrepreneurs, built up. All these like great men of modern China built this stuff up, and Xi Jinping is prepared to spend it down. And that's a tragedy for the people of China, because I think the engagement policy that America did toward China did not fail as hard. It failed, but it didn't fail nearly as badly as most people now believe. I think China liberalized in many ways under Zhang and Hu and Deng. I think they liberalized in many ways. They were still an authoritarian state, but they were a much more liberal authoritarian state where you could be a female Mao impersonator and no one would care. You could make Jiang Zemin is the toad memes, and it was just like, you had a pseudo free press, you had civil society. It was much more liberal. You had local elections. Americans don't understand gradations of democracy. They don't understand the deep roots of democracy because they're so far removed in history from their own democratization process in the 1700s and early 1800s, that they don't remember what it's like to build those institutions. And they couldn't see it happening in China. All they know now is like friend of America or foe. Like that's how they determine what's a democracy and what's not. China was headed toward greater democracy in an analogous way to like how Japan under the Taisho emperor was headed toward democracy in the 20s. In Japan's case, that blew up because of civil unrest and like right-wing cults. But in China, that was not going to happen. China went back toward authoritarianism for a simple reason, which is they got the wrong guy in power. And that's why I can't go to China, because I say that. Because, I think I am not a China bear. I am a Xi Jinping bear.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good rant.
I think that was excellent. Okay. You want to talk about your new book? What's it about?
Sure. The book will be coming out, I think, in March. And half the book is blog posts I've already written about Japan. It's coming out with a Japanese publisher. And the other half of the book is new stuff that I've written about foreign direct investment, how Japan can leverage people's love for Japan to promote foreign direct investment and exports in Japan.
Cool. Do you want to talk about some of the key recommendations?
Maybe, but I think I should just come back on when the book comes out.
Sure. You don't want to give too much away. Well, based on the research you did for that book, or I guess in the process of writing those blog posts too, do you have any new recommendations for Taiwan's development?
For Taiwan's development, I think that Taiwan's best. So one thing is that the constant threat from China has inhibited Taiwan from finding a new economic model. They haven't been able to think in the long term and do long-term planning because they've been focused on this short-term threat from China. Mm-hmm. That's unfortunate, but there is a way to dual purpose economic development and resisting threat from China, which is to become an arms manufacturer. One thing that people have noticed is that the United States can't make anything anymore. Taiwan, the other day, there was this story about how Taiwan wants to be America's new drone manufacturer. Taiwan doesn't have much. It doesn't really have a car industry. It doesn't really have a ship industry. It doesn't really have all this stuff. Japan and Korea do. Taiwan has an electronics industry. Taiwan knows how to make stuff with batteries, and they know how to, and they're able to do it. I think their environmental protections are less. Taiwan knows how to make drones. Taiwan as the arsenal of drones and as the arsenal of batteries and as the arsenal of everything electric that you don't want to source from China is the obvious play. It's a way to develop your economy, to build specialization in these industries. That Japan has ignored all this stuff. South Korea has ignored most of this stuff. I mean, I guess Kia is building EVs, but they've really dropped the ball. They really turned out to be more like Germany, wedded to heavy industry, and then less, they do lots of good electronic stuff. But I think that Taiwan has the same sort of electric first orientation China does. So Taiwan needs to go hard for all the stuff China's going for. Mm-hmm. And maybe if they still thought of themselves as the Republic of China, they would have already done this because China did it.
Right.
But I think that, nobody except China is building drones, nobody except China is building batteries. EVs, maybe a bridge too far. I don't know. Phones, get all those laptop contract manufacturers, Asus and Acer and Quanta and all those people, get those people to all make drones, make batteries, combine defense manufacturing and defense exports with electrification and electric manufacturing technology. That is what Taiwan should do.
Great. Okay. Let's talk about China and China's problems. First, do you want to compare and contrast China's real estate bust with the popping of the Japanese asset bubble in 1992?
Sure. So the similarity is that a bunch of people borrowed a bunch of money to buy land, and then a lot of that borrowing was based on the idea that land prices would appreciate, and then it didn't. This is also the exact same as the U.S. real estate bubble. And so there was massive debt involved here. So China has a huge amount of private debt, and everybody owes everybody money. China doesn't have a huge amount of external debt. It's internal. Rationalization of that debt will require deciding who gets to be poorer on paper and who gets to be richer on paper. Who takes the paper losses? Mm-hmm. This is a big problem because whoever ends up being stuck with the paper losses is going to be angry. I mean, you'd be, right? Yeah. So basically, it's this game of musical chairs to determine who takes these losses. And the natural thing to do is extend and pretend, is to pretend that no one has taken any paper losses and that everyone is just as rich as they were in 2019. And they're not. And so that will delay economic recovery, I think, in China because the fundamental financial problems will not be dealt with.
So in your essay, Xi Jinping versus Macroeconomics, you explained that a lack of aggregate demand is worsening China's local debt crisis and real estate woes via deflation. So do you want to talk about debt deflation a little bit here?
Yes. So there's two kinds of economic crises, and we tend to sometimes get these confused in our minds. One is the emerging market crisis, which is inflationary, where your currency crashes, everything gets too expensive, and that's a problem. This is brought on by excessive government debt, excessive external borrowing, currency pegs, and other things. I don't want to talk too much about this because China's not in much danger of this. Some people think China's in danger of it, and China's own leaders think that they're in danger of it, but they're not. The second kind of crisis, and the one that lasts longer, although it's less acute, but it lasts longer, is the deflationary depression. This is the United States Great Depression. This is the Great Recession of 2008 to 9 and beyond. This is Japan's stagnation in the 90s. This is Sweden's stagnation in the 90s, which people haven't heard of. And a deflationary depression happens when a whole bunch of people within a country have borrowed money from each other domestically. And then something happens to make their expectations abruptly more negative. And what that thing is, that is a great debate of macroeconomics, and no one knows what that is. But something happens to make their expectations more negative, and suddenly people shift to starting to pay down these debts. Now, if I owe you money and you owe me money, and we both downshift our spending so we can pay each other back, we don't go out and buy haircuts or, beer or pizza or medical care or whatever we'd buy.
Usually you say rabbit food when you go on this list.
Rabbit food.
Yeah.
What would you buy?
I don't know.
What do you
Flowers.
consume? What's your flowers?
What do I consume? Bubble tea.
Bubble tea. There you go. Bubble
Podcasting equipment.
Yeah, they're all good ideas. Bubble tea certainly in the right place. So then, but you buy less bubble tea.
Right.
Recession happens.
Sure.
Right? Because none of the bubble tea and podcasting equipment companies are getting consumption. So what do? Well, they cut their prices, right? They cut their prices and they also cut wages. That's called deflation. Deflation happens. When deflation happens, now sometimes it's not outright deflation. In the Great Recession, America had like 1/4 of deflation, I think. And then after that, we just had like very, very low inflation for a long time. But deflation or disinflation, which means low but still positive inflation, deflation or disinflation happens. That makes debt more of a burden. Because suppose you owe $10,000 US dollars, right? And suppose your salary gets cut in half and the prices of everything in the world get cut in half. Well, you're still able to afford as much like podcasting equipment and bubble tea as before, but your debt just became double the burden it was before because your debt is still the same number of dollars. It's not in real terms, it's fixed in number of dollars, which we call nominal terms. So then you're like, oh shit, I still owe this money and my salary got cut. And even if prices are lower, I still owe the same amount of money.
Yeah.
Oh man, I need to cut back on consumption even more. Well, what happens then? Aggregate demand falls, prices go down, and the cycle repeats because your debt gets even worse.
Right.
Irving Fisher, the guy who invented the Rolodex, and also was a famous economist, he figured this out. It's called Fisherian debt deflation. He figured this out in the Depression. It is it's not the thing that instigates a depression, but it pours fuel on the fire. It makes it last longer and be nastier. So that is happening in China right now. China's producer prices are falling. China has a glut of stuff. Everybody says this. China just subsidizes supply massively, much more than Japan or Korea ever did. They just subsidize supply. That means they have too much stuff. Now they're trying to offload that stuff by exporting. That will relieve some of the pressure. It is relieving some of the pressure, but not all of the pressure. And when people start tariffing them, it's going to relieve even less of the pressure.
Right.
And you're going to have 1 million electric car companies selling 1 million electric cars into China. Deflation will happen. You're going to have everybody selling everything they can, just supply. And so you're going to have a weakness of aggregate demand, especially because Xi Jinping is fairly austerity minded. He does not want to raise central government debt too high. And also you have all this giant unsolvable tangle of debts from the real estate era of the 2010s. And before. And so then you have this giant tangle of debts that make people not want to buy stuff. The government's not stepping in. And now you have deflation from the government subsidizing supply and from banks subsidizing supply on behalf of the government. Supply drives prices down, makes debt more of a burden. People consume less. You get this long stagnation.
Right.
And that's not going to destroy China's economy. It's not going to cause a collapse. It is just going to hobble them for years.
For our listeners, I do want to emphasize just how taboo the topic of deflation is in China right now. Because if you search the Mandarin word for deflation on any of the major news sites, you get no results from 2024. And Chinese social media is full of posts downplaying the risks or negative consequences of deflation. And of course, Ling Wei's article in the Wall Street Journal quoted Xi Jinping as saying, "What's so bad about deflation? Don't people like it when things are cheaper?" Right. So you mentioned that it would hobble China's economy over the long term, but can you explain a little bit more about what the consequences are if the CCP just kind of infinitely doubles down on not addressing bad debt and not addressing deflation?
So if you just keep doing that forever, you eventually recover, but it takes a decade to recover. And what happens is that people have to do the really hard work of paying down all those debts to each other. People eventually exit retrenchment mode. It will just take them longer.
Sure.
The people are still there, the factories are still there, everything's still there. although I guess in 10 years, the aging problem is going to start to bite. We could see Chinese economic weakness through 2030, I think, or even 2032. We could see this if, Xi Jinping doesn't change the way that he thinks about macroeconomics.
Sure. We can talk about the population aging. I remember recently that you tweeted like a picture of the Chinese population pyramid and said like, this is an underexplored reason why China wouldn't want to invade Taiwan. We're at a local minimum of fighting age men.
I mean, obviously, they have enough people to take Taiwan. They're 50 times the size. They have manpower to take Taiwan, but do they have the manpower to fight America, Japan, India, and just fight a general war right now? Well, they might want to wait a few years because they've got this big generation coming through. So China had this weird population pattern during the communist era, during the Mao era, where they had this giant baby boom in the 60s, like this huge baby boom, and then this giant baby bust, right? And not the one-child policy was only added to the baby bust. It was most of the baby bust was just independent. What that means is that you get this big echo, this demographic echo of that big generation. That echo, even with low fertility rates, you get an echo. Even if the generation doesn't reproduce itself, there's such a huge bulge in the snake, right? There's such a huge bulge in the pyramid that they will have a big cohort, a big cohort. And right now you see the millennial generation being really big, and China's generation Z is small.
Right.
But then the alphas are not going to be super big because of low fertility, but they're going to be pretty big because of the size of this double echo.
Right.
From the big, boomer generation. So the alpha generation that's now 5 to 15, let's say, somewhere around there. They are a big generation, and China's working age population has been falling for years. It is going to increase this year, and it is going to increase the next year, and it is going to increase the next year. And in 2027, it is going to peak.
I see.
And then it will start to fall, and then it will not stop falling. That will be the end of that. But then, unless they figure out a way to solve the population problem, I just heard they're having people like call up women randomly. Government people call up women and tell them like, shouldn't you have kids yet? And they don't realize that moms already do that.
Yeah.
And like it doesn't work. It backfires.
Yeah.
Eventually, most countries will try an extreme thing, which is to cut off pensions to childless people. But that's going to cause massive social unrest. If China tries that now, there's a chance the country could collapse because all these people without pensions, will be really, really angry, no future, and they'll have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
They'll be like 30 years old, 40 years old. They know they're not having kids. They have nothing to lose. Just torch things because you're dead when you're old. I'd be scared of that. China's always scared of internal dissent. China's biggest threat has always been China. Just like America, right? Our biggest threat has always been us. And China's the same way. In many ways, China and America are a lot more similar than either of them would like to admit. I could go on a giant rant about how Chinese culture and American culture, Chinese culture is actually the culture most similar to American culture of all the cultures on Earth. Should I go on that rant?
I think you've been on that rant the last time you were on ChinaTalk, actually.
Okay.
How we just like to wear Crocs and drive to the mall.
Why wear Crocs and drive to the mall? That's right. And just buy real estate and like have vague, unrealistic dreams of being rich.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, so China fears internal dissent, so I don't think it's going to do that soon. China's demographics are fine right now. They are fine for certainly the rest of this decade. They are absolutely fine. China will have about as many working age people at the end of this decade as it does right now. It's not going to change because it's going to go up and then down a little bit. It is in the 2030s, it starts going more gently down. It's really in the 2040s, it starts going down a lot. And then by 2050, you have a severe situation similar to where Japan is now. So China in 2045, I want to say, will be around where Japan is now. So China's got 20 years, before it gets to where Japan is now. And in the rest of Xi Jinping's term in office, I don't know whether Xi Jinping's last term will end in 32, but I think there's a chance because he's going to be 79. Like he's going to be old. Like maybe he'll stay on through like 37. I don't know. We'll see. But he didn't grow up with great nutrition. I don't know if he's going to make it.
Wait, is he short?
No, he's as tall as me.
Really?
He's perfectly average height.
Oh.
5'11". Yeah, no, the Russians who are always short. The Chinese leaders are always like my height.
Oh.
I'm the same height as Mao Zedong and Xi Jinping. Well, Deng Xiaoping, the best Chinese emperor, was a super short guy. He was tiny. Yeah, he was obviously just a much better leader than Mao or Xi. He was the true great man of Chinese history, and really short guy.
Really short.
So China, try short guy.
Great.
Yeah, Jiang Zemin was kind of short too. Who's like a short famous guy in China? They should put Pony Ma in charge of China.
Yeah, you think so?
I mean, he did a great job with Tencent. You know. Yeah, they should put him. They should make him like the oligarch ruler, like Shadow. He should be the Elon Musk of. They won't do any of that. Anyway, Xi Jinping will remain in charge because he's really good at one thing, which is being in charge. And okay, so China's demographics are fine until the 2040s, at least maybe through 2050s.
Sure.
And so I wouldn't worry about it if I were them, except in the general sense that everyone worries about low fertility now, but their demographics are going to be much more favorable than most of their opponents, even I would argue than America, because America is going through a social spasm where they're cutting off immigration, and China gains from that. So China will have a favorable demographic profile compared to its rivals for the next 2 decades, and they don't need to worry until after that. So they've got time.
That makes sense. So Georgist recently vacationed in China.
Yes.
And he expressed interest in a Georgist analysis of China's property market. Would you like to riff on that?
A Georgist analysis of China's property market. Okay, so China does officially have the Communist Party own all the land. And what you really have is a lease on the land, which Singapore does as well. Mm-hmm. This gives you the opportunity to basically do an in-kind land tax by choosing to force redevelopment wherever you want. In practice, people don't like this because everyone's wealth is in the leases. So in practice, America has eminent domain. Eminent domain is Georgist, right? So we can use, if we just simply declare it's in the interest of the state, we can just use your house. We can redevelop your house for whatever we want. And we have to pay you a fair price, which are like, I think $5 is fair. What do y'all think? Yeah, anyway. The way China is anti-Georgist is that they refuse to have property tax. Mm-hmm. Noah's cultural essentialist historical view of China is that China has had this giant weakness throughout its entire history, right? And it's not Confucianism or anything. It's low taxes. China has always been a Grover Norquist country. China has always been a low tax country. And this has screwed them again and again. Like I don't know why China can't tax its people. Obviously Denmark is too high tax of a country. You can go too high with this, but China doesn't have property taxes, which is why local governments relied on land sales to actually fund public services and infrastructure. Yeah. That was nuts. You were selling land. Did you think that was going to last forever? The answer is yes, they did. But the point is that China is anti-Georgist because Georgism uses land value tax and China is allergic to property tax. A land value tax is simply a property tax plus a tax credit for developing the land. That's it. That's the great Georgist idea. It's just property tax with a development incentive. Sure. That's it.
And do you think China could implement some kind of land value tax and allowed people to privately own land?
Of course.
And you think how much do you think this would solve their problem?
I don't think the private land ownership is going to do anything because I think the leases are already treated as land ownership. But I think that the property tax would do wonders for China. And they're not doing it for some political reasons that I don't understand. Probably, if China's just America across the Pacific, then it's because it's like Prop 13 in California.
Sure.
China, giant California, except California actually doesn't build anything and China builds everything.
Right.
California cannot build a single mile of high-speed rail. China can build all the miles of high-speed rail in the world. So, have you ridden the Chinese high-speed rail?
No, I haven't.
I would go, but I posted so many memes of Xi Jinping in a CIA hat. Every time he would make some blunder, I would be like, haha, he's working for the CIA. But then they're mad at me, I think. Yeah. They probably would take me out for tea if I went there.
I went there without a visa. And they have this program that allows you to transit from country A, China, country C, as part of your vacation. But there are no domestic flights allowed. And I flew in from Taiwan and I pretended I didn't speak Mandarin. And the guy calls a supervisor on the phone and says in Mandarin, so there's this girl flying in from Taiwan. Does that count as a separate country from China for the purposes of this visa-free entry program? And the guy on the phone thinks about it for a second. He goes, you should let the girl in. And then he hangs up the phone and he's like, and he says in English, "Oh, sorry about that. That was some other thing." And I was like, "Yeah, it sounded important." But so I don't know if I would roll the dice on that again.
One thing that we've forgotten about that was true that we sort of knew in the 90s, but have like since chosen to forget about is that free countries are nicer to live in.
Yeah.
Like it kind of sucks to like have people always checking your hukou or whatever for like what you can do.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of balls.
Yeah. Yeah, it sure is. You want to talk about healthcare?
Healthcare, yeah. So China's healthcare system is patchy. Another one of the many ways in which China is like America is that they fear that a universal healthcare system will make the government too expensive and will make people decadent and complacent. Mm-hmm. Americans think this too. It's dumb. They're wrong. But China and America both fear having like the kind of healthcare system that like other rich countries have implemented.
And you think doing a whole bunch of healthcare spending would alleviate some of the aggregate demand problem?
Yes, 100%. Freeing people up to spend because they don't have to take care of grandma is this incredibly liberating thing. That's why Social Security in America in the Depression was a big stimulus, because suddenly all these working age people were like, wait a second, I don't have to spend to take care of grandma. Well, taxes were doing it, so you still were doing it. You were just doing it through taxes. But so basically using the state to take some of the burden of elder care off of people's hands frees people to go spend money and start an inflationary cycle to beat that deflation and get aggregate demand flowing again. So I understand why they don't do it. It's a bad, stupid reason, just like why America doesn't do it. America's also stupid.
Yeah.
And so they should do it. That would really help them out of this hole. It's the most obvious way to just have the government boost consumption. Boost old people's consumption. Now, the thing about China is that old Chinese people have very, very austere tastes because they grew up really poor. Have you ever seen that video where they have Chinese people and their American kids eating Panda Express?
No, I haven't.
Oh, the American kids are like, oh my God, so disgusting, low class, blah, blah, blah. The Chinese parents are like, I would eat this every day. It has sugar in it, calories, because they grew up poor. And so they have these very austere tastes. They don't consume a lot. Getting them to consume more, giving like a golden retirement to the Chinese boomer generation as a thank you for all their service to the Chinese state would be a really nice thing to do and would free up younger Chinese people to consume on their own because some of the burden of elder care would be alleviated. And they should do that. China's leaders, especially Xi Jinping, who is recognizable as sort of like a 2007 era Fox News dad. That's by the way, I feel like despite not being a quote unquote China hand at all, like I've managed to do a decent job predicting and understanding Xi Jinping himself because I understand that he's basically a conservative boomer. And you can imagine this guy in 2007, like listening to Fox News, like watching like Bill O'Reilly or whatever and saying like, software isn't real technology. It's not a physical product. Only manufacturing is real technology. Or like, why do we have all these girly men on TV? We shouldn't have girly men on TV. And now we have the gays? Why? You're playing too many video games. If the government pays for you, people won't work for themselves and take care of their families like they ought to. And so that's why he's not doing it. Stimulus, it's a sugar high. It's a temporary sugar high. It'll make people get decadent and consume more. You can just imagine these things.
Yeah, that makes sense. We got a little off topic, but I like the rant.
You like my boomer Xi Jinping?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Okay, have you read about the process of like transitioning to NHI in Japan?
No, I haven't read about the historical process of it. I know a lot about the system as it exists now, but I don't know much about the history, so educate me.
Okay, well, I don't know about what it looked like in Japan, but I know in Taiwan, they started with like a public option essentially for specific types of workers. And then they did a big audit based on the health consumption of all the people in that healthcare pool to set the first reimbursable prices for everybody else and transition everybody in. So the big difference between the Japanese system and the Taiwanese system is in Japan that, you have to pay like a certain percentage.
Yeah, in Taiwan you don't. But why Taiwan is such cheap healthcare, I don't know how they do that.
They use a prospective payment system to set copays. So no matter what intensity of treatment you get, you pay a set fee to see the pathogen doctor, regardless of whether or not you like are having a hypochondria episode or like if you actually are on death's door. And then the premium calculation is like a payroll tax, which is split between people, employers, and the government.
But if you're rich and poor, you pay the same premium.
It's the same percentage.
Same percentage. So
Yeah.
so it's means tested. Whereas
Yeah.
it's something that in America, that's not means tested.
Yeah.
So means tested premium on healthcare.
Yes.
That's cool.
And then the other thing that Taiwan does, they set the reimbursal rate. So there's a set amount that the government's willing to pay hospitals for any service.
Right.
And then if the hospital negotiates with suppliers to get a better deal, then they get to keep the rest of that as profits. So they make the hospitals do all the dirty work to negotiate with suppliers. But in Japan, they set the prices and you can't charge more and you can't charge less either.
Right, exactly. They do price controls.
But yeah, everything on the care side is privatized here. And then these negotiations become public eventually because every few years the government does an audit to figure out where we can lower the reimbursal rates. And so if one city on the island gets a good deal from a certain supplier, then that deal now becomes public to the entire island.
I see.
Yeah.
So basically everything is about crushing providers.
Perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, so Japan's like that too. The price control system is more rigid, but the national health insurer basically figures out what it can afford to pay.
Sure.
And Medicare negotiating with people would be like this too if we did that. The problem is this can hurt innovation if you do it. What you should do is do it with regards to how much profit the suppliers are making, not with regard to how much prices they're charging. So if you wring money out of the suppliers, let's say, if you wring money out of them by forcing them to forego innovation and be short-termist, then they're free riding on American medical innovation. But what you need to do is you need to base your haggling on their profits, not on their prices. Because if they are investing a whole lot in innovation, that should mean that they get to charge higher prices.
That makes sense.
As long as they're not using mislabeled innovation expenses to secretly pay themselves out, which they'll try to do. They try to do it with the R&D tax credit right now.
Sure, yeah. I'll say one more interesting thing about the Taiwanese healthcare system, which is that if the government suspects providers of squeezing out profit in the wrong areas, they can pull the rug out from some of their revenue sources by suddenly no longer requiring a prescription for certain drugs. So you don't need a prescription for parasite medications here. You don't need a prescription for arthritis medications or inhalers or birth control. You don't need a prescription for any of it.
That's great.
Here. And in Japan, you do. And it's kind of like a warning shot to force healthcare providers to charge lower prices, or else they'll cut off the revenue streams and put them at local pharmacies. But anyway, so do you have strong feelings about why the Japanese model is the one that is right for China?
I don't know if it's right for China. China could do the Taiwanese model. China could do the German model. China could do the French model.
Sure.
They're fine.
Sure.
Just do something. For America, the Japanese model is the right model because it's similar to what we already do for old people. Medicare works very similar to the way Japan and Korea's healthcare systems work for everyone. Mm-hmm. So it would be simplicity itself to simply do Medicare, but for all.
Sure.
Yet not the Medicare for all plan that Bernie does, which is, much more similar to Canada's system.
Right.
So, or it's actually a more boneheaded version of Canada's system.
Yeah.
So Bernie's plan styled itself Medicare for all, but it's not. It's not like Medicare. Mm-hmm. Japan's system is like Medicare for all. Mm-hmm. And so everyone, let's call it Medicare for everyone.
Medicare for everyone. Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. We can go back to spitballing a little bit.
All right. I love spitballing.
Do you have a spicy take for Taiwanese diplomacy? If they can't get nuclear weapons, then what do you think they should do?
I mean, honestly, the only thing they can do that they haven't done is reach out to Russia.
Funny enough, Taiwan's submarine technology, they got technology transfer from Putin because Chen Shui-bian, the former president of Taiwan, and Putin used to be buddies. Mm-hmm. And so Putin personally sent teams of submarine scientists to Taiwan to teach him how to build the narwhal, the indigenous submarine that they just built here. Yeah.
So one thing about reaching out to Russia is that will make it easier to befriend both India and the Trump administration. India remains pro-Russia because of Cold War ties and because of geopolitical hedging and just sentimentality, because Russia was on their side. And Trump is reflexively pro-Russia because Democrats said that he's pro-Russia, and so he has to be. Like Democrats said, Russia helped him get elected in 2016, so he thinks favorably of Russia. He thinks of Putin as like his fellow macho man and blah blah blah. A number of like smaller states, so like Vietnam, quietly reaches out to Russia. North Korea is scared of China and is quietly like helping Russia with the Ukraine war so that it wants Russia to defend it. Russia probably doesn't have the capacity to defend it, but Russia maintains a almost mystical hold on the Chinese imagination because Russia helped China in its, during the Republican period, Russia helped China, and then during the early communist period, Russia helped China. And so I think Chinese people, the boomers who are now in charge of China, grew up thinking of Russia as their big brother. And now they know Russia is much weaker than before, but they still respect it. She still treats Putin as an equal. There's no obvious like contempt for Putin like there is for North Korea or, even like, I guess Pakistan. Like China displays open contempt for these and just, considers them inferior satellites. But it considers Russia and America are the countries that China considers equals in the world. And does Russia deserve it? No. But if Taiwan somehow, hedges its bets by getting close to Russia, maybe that can work and exercise some kind of hold on the Chinese imagination, where the people in charge of China will be like, not attack Taiwan because Russia says not to. I don't know, but it's the last card they can play diplomatically.
It's funny that you call it a card because Chiang Kai-shek tried to do this explicitly,
right?
And it failed, but he called it the Russia card.
Right.
Called it the Soviet card. I've got a couple questions to wrap up about your production process. I really admire that you are willing to admit when you're wrong, as was the case with like the BMD pessimism stuff, because you don't have an editor. I think you wrote a post where you were like, I was wrong about BMD. It worked. Israel shot down a bunch of missiles.
Well, I supported Elizabeth Warren. She turned out to be a lot worse than anybody expected. She said a lot of great stuff and she had some good ideas back in the day. And I thought, oh, good. But then she just like turned into this weird, like backroom dealer, like anti-business sort of, fixer.
Yeah.
Who just sucked. Elizabeth Warren, you sucked much more than I thought you would. I'm disappointed, but I got it wrong. I didn't expect inflation to rise as fast, to do what it did, because I thought that people's spending habits during the pandemic would be prolonged for another year, but they weren't.
Sure.
Yeah, I get things wrong all the time.
Yeah. So how often when you're researching a post do you think, oh, the basis of this post was not correct? Do you have any advice for like self-employed writers who want to like gut check their ideas?
Do your best, and sometimes you'll fail. You will fail. Just don't be the kind of person who builds your career on saying you were always right. Otherwise, you'll spend so much of your time just, defending your old claims and claiming, well, actually, just be like, I was wrong.
Sure.
Move on.
That's good advice.
Humans are fallible, and if people want infallible commentators, they ought to know that they're getting charlatans.
Yeah. Okay, next question. How do you come up with your ideas?
I have no idea.
You have no idea. Okay.
They appear. And I have so the one thing I do, by the way, that so I basically write three types of posts. One is a type of post where I see something in the news, I already know how to explain everything, and I just write it. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of post I wrote today. I wrote a post about how to measure the relative sizes of economies. I know all the stuff, so I just posted the charts that people were sharing around and that the Wall Street Journal had, and I was like, well, okay, what's really going on is this, and let me explain. So that's the first kind. The second kind is where I'm like, okay, I'm really interested to find out why American manufacturing productivity stagnated. So I'm going to spend a whole day reading about this and then tell you what I found.
Sure.
And that's a pretty typical kind of post as well. Those are two, and then the third kind of post, though, is the kind that I think people don't really realize how to do. So here's the secret sauce. Mm-hmm. Whenever I see an interesting article, I put it in a single Google Doc. That Google Doc has 100 topic headings, each with, stuff underneath it, links underneath it. Mm-hmm. As soon as there's that becomes the focus, that topic becomes a big thing in the news, the current thing in the news. I pull it out, I write about it. I have all the links already done. I've already thought about it. I'm ready.
Smart.
So as you read, if you want to write every day, mm-hmm. everything you read, you can't write about everything you read every day. Mm-hmm. Read a lot. You have to read a lot. Yeah. Save all those things for a rainy day. And when the day comes when that's the thing in the news, then you write about that. So for example, a couple weeks ago, they had this giant blow up about Indian immigration. Mm-hmm. Well, I had been meaning to write a post about Indian immigration, H-1Bs and all that stuff for like months and months, and had saved up a whole ton of links about it.
Yeah.
Including academic papers, other people's blog posts and news stories.
Yeah.
Then when I was like, oh, that's what this is about. So I scrolled down to that, grabbed it, copied, cut and paste to the top of the Google Doc. And then I just, control click in Chrome until I opened all the links that I had. Then I just started writing, and then I had my research already done. And so that kind of like preemptive research just from what you read. I think a lot of people read stuff like, I should write about that someday, and then forget about it and then go looking for it later. Or they decide, I'm going to write about X today. Let me go research that.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm more like, I'm going to read everything interesting in the world today, and I'm going to take all those links and I'm going to put them under topic headings.
You're going to file it for later. Very smart. Okay, let's follow it up with a fun one. What's your bubble tea order?
My bubble tea order is just absolute classic. So Hong Kong style milk tea.
Oh yeah.
I love that. And some will have a Japanese flavor that's also very good. Anyway, those are all great. But classic boba.
Sure.
Always classic boba. Never get like lychee, jelly cubes or whatever like that. No, boba. Although I do sometimes like the tiny boba. Those are pretty good.
Those are fun. What's your favorite thing about Taiwan?
My favorite thing about Taiwan is how laid back it is. I have never seen a country this laid back.
Nice place to live.
It's just so chill. Yes, they'll mess up your order sometime. Yes, people mill about aimlessly in the train station. Like I just mentally apply all my rules from Japan for living here, and they don't work. But like it's just really sweet and nice. Like people are just really chill. I hate the idea that China would blow up a place this chill.
Yeah.
Like that's just a crime.
And what song would you like to end the episode with?
I would like to recommend Wifey by Dizzy Dizzo, which is a really great song. It is underrated portrait of the female wives of mafia leaders of the KMT era, who were these just extremely strong women who would essentially run their husbands like, illegal business empires, and were just utter bosses and are sort of lost to history.
Great. Perfect. Well, Noah Smith, thank you so much for being a part of ChinaTalk.
It's been great. Thanks for having me on.